All right, we're back for another episode of Summer Showcase Northern Lights with my co-host Michael Washington, and we are of course talking about the CFL, as you can tell dancing around in the background here. Thank you everybody for tuning in already. Looks like we have quite the crowd, which I was not expecting considering the fact that there is a game going on right now. So we appreciate y'all tuning in with us. Michael, how are you doing tonight?
I'm doing really well. BC just scored for anybody that is out there, maybe not watching the game or got away from the game. BC just scored Vernon Adams threw a little touchdown to the running back out of the backfield uh, after a big Alexander Hollins play. But yeah, other than that, I'm doing good, man. Love watching football, and the CFL makes me happy. So
Definitely a great league and very interesting to watch this season. One of the things that we were going to start off with, and I have to get my graphic ready before we go into that, but this season has been very surprising to say the least. When we look at the top of the league, I don't think that most of us expected Saskatchewan to be so good so fast. Kudos to the coaching staff that is now there. They seem to have righted the ship very quickly. And then also, looking at like teams like Winnipeg that are, falling flat on their face so far this season, it seems like, there's just a lot of surprising situations unfolding very quickly in the season so far. When you look at it, what's more surprising to you, the situation with Winnipeg or the situation with Saskatchewan?
Honestly, I'm going to say Winnipeg, and primarily I say Winnipeg just because it's a situation where what has it been? The last four Grey Cups have featured them in some capacity, I believe, and they're 2-2 in that stretch. So like they've been at the top for so long, and you knew that there was eventually going to be a rough patch coming, right? Because so much talent goes. But this team didn't feel like that they lost a ton of talent. Like Dalton Schoen, uh, Lawler, they were all there. The Brady Oliveira, Zach Calaris, all these guys that were such a mainstay for these teams and winning teams um, were there. And now all of a sudden you're looking at it. There's some injuries that have happened this year, but you're looking at it going, okay, what is actually happening with this team? Now, I will say a 2-point loss to BC last week doesn't really, concern me. It was more the Audible game that was a little bit of a surprise, and that game was only 4 points. So they've lost 2 games by a total of 6 points, right? Like, so it's not like this team is getting blown out, right? We're not looking at like a situation where they're losing by 13, 14 two-score games on a consistent basis. It's just, why is it all of a sudden that a veteran-led team like Winnipeg is going from winning all these close games because of their experience to losing these games? And uh, there's really no pinpoint factor. Like, you can't put your finger on any one thing except for maybe a little bit of a weaker offensive line. Other than that, it doesn't make much sense. And I think that that's really kind of where uh, I'm at with this team right now. So that's why I think is why it makes it so much more shocking than Saskatchewan being on top.
That's completely fair. Winnipeg's been, for the lack of a better term, a dynasty for almost a decade now. Since they've had a losing season, now here they are 0-3 after 3 games against opponents that I don't want to say they should have beaten because all of these teams are much improved this season. But at the same time, if you would have asked me before the season if Winnipeg would have come out of these 3 games with 3 losses, I definitely would have bet the house that they would not have. And here we are. So it's kind of crazy to see. And that's exactly why our theme for tonight is this right here.
Chrissy, this is for you.
Now, obviously, for trademark reasons, I can't play that whole clip. But yeah, this is obviously a lot like the Upside Down for anybody who's a Stranger Things fan. Obviously, Michael and I are. It's crazy to see this season because it seems like everything's just out of place. Everything's upside down, for lack of a better term. So it's definitely interesting to see Winnipeg falling, Saskatchewan on top. Ottawa's looking scrappy so far, although, we'll talk about the fact that they just got blown out this past week. After I predicted a win against Montreal, which was probably foolish on my part, but here we are. And then, we'll talk about some other things that have definitely developed as the season have gone. But some of the bigger news for this week that we got was the fact that Dalton Schoen is actually out for the season, and that is per Dave Naylor. So, we just got this announcement right before the game kicked off with BC and Edmonton, and ultimately it's a situation where Dalton Schoen will miss the rest of the season. They already had injuries at wide receiver with Kenny Lawler out. I believe he's got a broken forearm. He's on the 6-game injury list as well. Don't quote me on this, but I want to say he's been on there for 2 weeks now. So, he's got a couple more weeks before he can return as well. So, a lot of attrition all of a sudden there on the offensive side of the ball. They also lost the running back for a week there, Brady Oliveira. So man, Winnipeg, they've got a lot of issues. It'll be interesting to see if they can overcome all this stuff and get a victory going forward. But let's go ahead and get into the other news for tonight, which was the fact that Vernon Adams was questionable heading into this game, and he has ultimately been able to play and look fairly decent considering, he walked in with an injury. What do you make of the fact that Vernon Adams didn't practice yesterday, coming out looking hot, immediately firing in this game?
Well, I mean, I think one of the biggest things is when you look at a guy like Vernon Adams is it's just proof that practice is practice for these guys. As long as they're able to go, you can just shoe in and just go, right? Like it's basically the Allen Iverson thing. Like we're talking about practice, right? You remember that whole thing? I don't know if you remember it or not, but he absolutely had a point, especially when it comes to the veteran side of things, right? If it's a new team with new pieces and you need to work on that, I get the practice thing on that. But these guys have been through camp. We're heading into this is week 4 of the CFL season already. That's crazy to me, by the way. But it just goes to show that the practice side of things isn't as important. It's still important, but it's not as important in the season when you have a guy as veteran, and experienced as Vernon Adams, right? Like it's pretty obvious that he's got this game rolling. Him and Alexander Hollins are lights out the last few games, and he's picking up right where he left off. So it's not really a surprise to me. I saw the questionable tag, but I felt like if he was even 80%, he was probably going to go. You're on mute, Sam.
Sorry about that. It kind of piqued my curiosity because I had seen that he was a full participant up until, yesterday Tuesday it was. Sorry about that. So Tuesday that he missed practice and he didn't participate at all. And I was like, oh, okay. That's something to kind of keep an eye on. You never know. Maybe he doesn't end up playing in this game, but ultimately he's ended up starting and looking decent. He looks like, this is very early in the season. Obviously, this is only week 4, but he looks like he's on an MVP trajectory, or an MOP, most outstanding player, the CFL calls it, trajectory so far. I mean, he's already over 1,000 yards passing prior to this game. He's added another over 100 yards on the day already. 6 touchdowns prior to this game, 1 interception. He's added another one today. So, I mean, he's already over or pretty close to 1,200 yards passing on the year after 4 games, basically averaging 300 yards per game. I mean, unbelievable performance by him so far. Is there anybody off the top of your head? Obviously, I know this wasn't really one of our topics off camera, but anybody off the top of your head outside of Vernon Adams that really is kind of competing for that award right now?
Well, up until his injury last week, I would have said Trevor Harris. I mean, with Saskatchewan, the way he's playing, winning games, because let's face it, as good as Saskatchewan has been, a lot of it has been with how well Trevor Harris has been playing. I don't know what the status is on his injury. I have not seen anything official yet. I don't know if I just may have missed it. I kind of took a social media break a little bit today, so I'm not 100% sure if there was something I missed along those lines or not. But I know he didn't finish the game against Hamilton, and they still went on to win, but they were already ahead in that game when Harris got hurt. So I would have said Trevor Harris for sure. Right now, other than that, there's really nobody that I can think of that may be competing with Vernon. Maybe Cody Fajardo for Montreal, but I would have just said Trevor Harris for sure. The injury is going to be the key component in that one.
That would be a good pick as well. Trevor Harris has been playing out of his mind as well. I'm glad to see him, playing so well considering the fact that he's getting up there in age. I think he's 37 this season, if I'm not mistaken. But let's go ahead and round back around to the game that I know you really want to talk about. The Thursday night game, Ottawa versus Montreal. I believe this was in Montreal, if I'm not mistaken.
It was.
So, yeah, I foolishly predicted Ottawa would have a win in this one. I was drinking the red-black Kool-Aid, and here we are. They ultimately lost 47-21. So not only was I wrong on my prediction, it was not pretty, which I guess I should have seen this coming. Montreal is by far and away the favorite to win a Grey Cup this season from the East Division. So definitely, should have known this was coming, but here we are. What are your thoughts on this game?
Well, I mean, the reason why I'm kind of chuckling is because obviously I gave you a little bit of shit, before we came on air about it. But, for me, I think that this came down to a situation where Ottawa's just not ready yet. Like, they are scrappy. They are definitely got a team that they have pieces in place. You take a look at the statistics. Justin Hardy is played lights out in this game. Drew Brown actually played fairly well across the board, considering this Montreal defense is no joke. It got away from them on the flip side of it, right? It was the Ottawa defense that kind of just allowed Cody Fajardo to do whatever he wanted against them, and that kind of becomes a problem. Or not, that kind of becomes the issue with teams like Ottawa that are trending upwards, right? There's still bits and pieces missing somewhere, right? And Montreal was there last year, right? The defending Grey Cup champions, they're still hitting on all cylinders. They literally they haven't acted like they had a Grey Cup hangover at all. So when I predicted this game, that was really where I was coming from that standpoint. If this was like week, like 13, 14, and these two were playing, I think it would be a much closer game, right? Because Ottawa would have a chance to really kind of have all this in place as long as they avoided the major injury bug. So I don't think Ottawa played poorly. I think the score got away from them really, really early in the first quarter. It was probably one of the worst first quarters I think Ottawa probably may have played. The first half was just, at that point, it was 30-1 at the half or whatever. So it was very, very hard uphill trekking from that point on. But I think overall it was much better for Ottawa in the second half, and that was the team that we should have seen for the all game. And that's where I'm kind of hanging my hat on for this one.
Yeah, a couple key things that stick out to me. I mean, as far as this game for Montreal is the fact that they played rather mistake-free. I mean, first of all, no sacks allowed on Cody Fajardo. I mean, when you look at how you want to find success as a quarterback, a good way to start is staying upright. If you don't have a lot of pressure in your face, typically you're going to be able to sit back there and read the defense and look for the open receiver and have some success. And this is obviously a byproduct of that. He didn't throw an interception all game long. They actually had one turnover, but I mean, realistically, it was bound to happen at some point. So I don't even necessarily credit them that on them. They still had some penalties, so they didn't necessarily play a spotless game. But then you look at Ottawa, 9 penalties for 115 yards, 3 fumbles, 2 lost, an interception. It added up. They failed to convert in the red zone there. And when you look at all these different things, it's impossible for them to overcome these many mistakes, especially when you're playing a team like Montreal. And, at the end of the day, like I said, I was drinking the red-black Kool-Aid, but, I stand by my decision. I really think that Ottawa is very, very much improved this season. This time last year, we probably would have seen a 47-0 blowout, to be quite honest. So I really think we've come a long way. Whether or not it culminates in a winning season, we've got a long way to go to find out. So we'll be here every week to figure that out. But we'll go ahead and move on to the next game after a quick commercial break.
This is Current. It's the card my parents used to pay me for mowing the lawn, running errands, and doing well in school. This is the card I used when we got the idea to make our own clothes. And we spread the word, drove downtown, and sold everything we made. This is the card I used to do the things that really matter. This is Current. Visit current.com and download the app for free today.
All right, so obviously the next game of the week was the BC Lions versus the Winnipeg Blue Bombers on Friday night. And as we alluded to before, Winnipeg found another way to lose this season. They are 0-3 so far in the year, lost by 2 points to BC. So why don't you go ahead and kick us off on this one?
Speaking of BC, real quick, the Edmonton Elks have scored a touchdown. Curly Gittins from MBT. So this game is now 11-10. If for those who are kind of trying to pay attention to both things, this game was just came down to Winnipeg not making the plays when it mattered the most, and I think that was one of the things that that I think they want to try to get back to. And for me, the biggest surprise comes from the lack of pass rush. Right, because like Willie Jefferson has been so good for so long, and the fact that he's, it doesn't really feel like the Willie Jefferson of yesteryear, right? Like so far through the first 3 games for them, it kind of feels like maybe he's lost a step, or maybe he's not quite there yet, or whatever it may be. I do not expect Winnipeg to continue losing these close games. That's the biggest thing in this situation. BC is a really good team. Vernon Adams is obviously, playing MOP style of football right now at this time. I know it's way too early to predict that. But overall, I just think that this is just Winnipeg trying to figure out where they can, where they need to identify where it is really that's the key component that's allowing them to lose these games, right? Like that's the biggest thing. Obviously we talked about Dalton Schoen moving forward, and Kenny Lawler are both hurt right now. So they're going to have to go outside the box to try to bring somebody in at wide receiver, and hopefully they can do that. Maybe somebody can step up that we're not expecting. They need these young guys to finally get to a point, whereas BC is just, they were favored for a reason, right? Like they were favored coming into the season for a reason. And, they're going to find ways to win the game, and right now at this point in time, that they're finding the ways where Winnipeg isn't.
Yeah, and I mean, it's again, we've talked about this at length so far this season already, but I mean, it's very surprising to see this by Winnipeg. I mean, they were coming into the season stacked. I mean, obviously brought back Chris Streveler, which I was very excited about as their short yardage quarterback, which he was huge in this game. As you can see, 10 carries, 24 yards, and 3 touchdowns. In fact, he scored a good majority of the points that were scored by Winnipeg on the day. As you see, Zach Claros did not throw a touchdown pass. No other rushing touchdown pass or touchdowns there for anybody else. So, I mean, kind of surprising to see the Winnipeg offense just struggle to find any sort of momentum week after week after week, even though they do have so much talent. Despite the fact that they've had so many injuries. But let's talk about William Stanback for a minute. I mean, I know, we were both, we didn't spend a whole lot of time talking about it this offseason, to be quite honest. But, we both kind of like perked our ears up at the fact that Stanback signed with BC, coming over from Montreal last season after winning a Grey Cup. All of a sudden, he goes from one Grey Cup, contender to another Grey Cup contender. And it seems like he's been a huge factor in that offense already through this season. I mean, obviously 16 carries for 83 yards this past season, That's not a huge day per se, but when you look at what they've had in the past there next to Vernon Adams, I think this is a little bit more established running game for him to lean on, and it's really opened up this offense.
Yeah, I think the biggest thing about Stanback and what he brings to this offense is the ability to balance it out, right? Like you said, it's not a ton of yardage. It's 83 yards, but it's the touches. You keep the defense honest, and you have to, and it's allowing these receivers to kind of make these big plays that get them out of jams, and get them out of situations. Like we've already seen it a couple times tonight against Edmonton, and it was on point here against Winnipeg too. And I think that that's one of the things that never gets stated enough when it comes to bringing in a veteran running back like William Stanback, right? It's just the way that is. So what he offers that doesn't show up in the stat sheet, right? A key block on second down to prevent it from going to third down, or a key block on third down during one of those weird plays where you have to go for it on 3rd and 4, or hey, just I'll be your outlet. Just I'll be right there. Just throw it. Don't worry about it. I'll get it. Type of stuff that you don't really get from certain players that haven't had that experience, right? And the CFL is a very the major successes in this league, the ones that stick around for a long time, are the ones that bring that experience to new teams wherever they go. And you saw it last year. Stanback did it with Montreal, and really balanced out that offense that led them to a Grey Cup championship, right? So that's the hope for BC. So far, looks like it's off to a good start. We'll see if it maintains that way, because I believe he's 33, 34 maybe. I feel like he's in his 30s, but he's been around for a little while regardless. But it just
29.
He's 29. Okay, so yeah, I mean that's basically 34 in football years for running backs. But yeah, so I mean just in general, I mean he's been around for a while, so but he does provide that element, right, for a team, and BC's definitely benefiting from it on offense right now.
Absolutely. And one more guy I wanted to talk about on this BC offense, which, we've been talking about a little bit here and there, but Alexander Hollins. I mean, in this past game, you see it right there, over 200 yards receiving on the season, already over 400 yards total, 3 touchdowns, coming off a season when last year he had 1,173 yards and 9 touchdowns. So, obviously, Vernon Adams and Hollins have a developing connection that is really also helping this offense. But adding that aspect that Stanback brings, that the bigger bruiser back that can really run through tackles and give you yards after contact, was a huge addition for BC Lions this season, I think.
Yeah, and one of the key things about this for Alexander Hollins and whatnot, and it's been his connection with Vernon Adams. Like just today, 2 plays already against Edmonton that he made that were big. One led to a touchdown, the other led to the field goal. So he's making key plays and becoming the kind of the safety net and go-to guy for Vernon Adams, and that's what you want, right? That's what you want for a quarterback. You want a guy you can throw it up there, chuck it up there to set you up and put into place. And it's not just 7 for 215 because Alexander Hollins is catching 3-yard outs and then breaking a tackle and going for 70 yards. It's 7 for 215, and of those 7, 5 of them are first down plays, right? Or key plays that set up a touchdown drive if he's not scoring himself, right? So that's the difference between just being a stat patter and being a guy whose stats actually mean something, the efficiency behind those. And right now, Hollins is doing, the ability to pad his stats and also be able to actually put together key plays during drives. And it's rare to find it on a consistent basis, but so far he's been doing it through these first 3 weeks.
Absolutely. And I mean, it'll be interesting to see if he can continue it, but obviously coming off the year he had last season, it's looking like he's not going to slow down. So, I mean, I wonder at what point, does he start getting some NFL consideration? He's still fairly young at only 27 years old. I mean, he's not overly over the hill, but I mean, we'll see. We'll see how things go for him the rest of the season.
Stay in the CFL.
Yeah, I would agree. I mean, be a star rather
build
than
build that brand, be a star. I mean, I know these leagues are, a lot of people like to have these ultimate, the ultimate dream is to get back to the NFL and stuff, but at 27, be a star, build your brand. CFL's big enough to the point where you're able to make some money and really get to know who you are. So go do that. That's the way that I look at it.
I agree. As we've talked about several times, it's not necessarily what you can get immediately from your situation. You got to look long term as well. So if you build up kind of a cult following in the CFL, where you're probably not going to get that as a practice squad player in the NFL, you could parlay that into something long term. It just depends on who you are and where you're at in life. I mean, Henry Burris is a great example. I mean, he was just back for a game with Ottawa just a couple weeks ago, and he built his entire career out of the CFL and
Right.
became an NFL coach because of it. So there are ways of making a career of it. Just because you're not in the quote unquote big league doesn't mean you're not good enough to be a lasting star or a someone who could rewrite history in a league.
Yeah, it's one of the things that I think frustrates me the most is and I know what you were saying, and I know you don't think this way, but like, the big leagues, quote unquote, like, these are legitimate football leagues. Like, even though it's not the NFL, it's still a legitimate football league. Like, these guys are professionals. They're paid to play. They do all the same things that your NFL stars do. Like, they got to go out there and still perform, right? Or they're gone. So to me, it's just like, I hate the idea of when somebody says minor league or whatever else, because it's like they're not. These aren't minor leagues. Like, this is a legitimate league. This is legit football. These are guys playing, and they're doing something that we wish we could do. So I hate the fact that we're discrediting them by calling them the minor leagues per se, or a football community calls them the minor leagues. Like, the NFL definitely has set itself up as like the major one. We understand that. Like, that can go unstated, right? Like, it's the top 0.5% of all players in the area, the world, you could say. It does not mean, though, that there isn't a ton of talent out there that deserves to play, right? So that I hate that saying. And I get it. It's not I understand that you saying it wasn't a dig at it. It's just, it sucks that that's even like an actual thing. You know what I mean? Like, hate it.
Preaching to the choir, brother. Preaching to the choir. I mean, I've heard on several occasions semi-pro football and all this stuff, and I'm like, man, if you only knew what the difference between semi-pro and what these guys do is, you just don't understand until you really get into this and understand that the guys are playing the semi-pro. They're paying to play, not being paid to play. So,
right.
Large difference here. Very, very many leagues out there that are viable options to have a professional career. Yes, you most likely have to have a job outside of it, or you should, because you're, earning a good bulk of your income in only 6 months out of the year. But at the same time, there are also NFL players that do the same thing. Why wouldn't you? You have a whole 6 months out of the year where you're not necessarily focused on football. So, I mean, in that sense, if you're not making millions, there's no reason why you wouldn't be working a job. So let's not misconstrue that as semi-professional football. That's guys making smart financial choices for their lives.
Correct. And on top of that too, like the whole second thing, like the second job thing, like how often does that happen? How often is that going to happen if these leagues are successful? Right? Like, if these leagues are successful, the next thing you know, you might be getting a bigger contract. So, it's just a matter of time before that happens for a lot of these leagues, and you just gotta pay attention to it. That's all.
Absolutely. And for those that are watching right now and you're questioning, how good is the level of play in the CFL? This was a perfect game to look at. I mean, another 3-point deficit in this game. And this is one where I believe it was the ninth game of the season. Don't quote me on that. That was decided by 8 points or less. So I mean that right there tells you how much parity there is in this league after just 4 weeks. And two of the better quarterbacks in the league, despite the fact that they're Cameron Dukes here is fairly young. But I mean, look at this: 28 of 38 for 342 yards, 4 touchdowns, no interceptions. You go over to Dukes, 18 for 21 for 214, 2 touchdowns, 0 interceptions. I mean, typically teams go as their quarterbacks go, and that's why we saw almost, over 70 points scored in this game collectively, because these two quarterbacks are extremely talented and truly, borderline NFL players.
Yeah, and I think that I can name 5 games right off the top of my head that were decided by 8 points or less. Edmonton is in 3 of them. All 3 of their games have been decided. I think it was 8-3 and 3, if my memory holds on that. So, and then you factor in the 2 that we were talking about with Winnipeg earlier. So, I mean, there's 5 losses right there amongst those 2 teams. So 9 probably makes total sense as far as, divided by 8 or less. I think that this game is just more of a telltale sign of the differences, right? If you go back and take a look at Edmonton, Kadeem Carey for Toronto ran for over 100 yards. I don't think Edmonton had a run game that was as efficient. So the balance is off kilter for Edmonton. I also question, and I've made no qualms about how I feel about Chris Jones, but Chris Jones, I question a lot of his decision making in the second half of these games. Right, Saskatchewan, they had a lead. They were up 21-7 or something like that, 21-6. And blew it because of really piss poor play calling. MBT is putting up, MOP type numbers. Nobody's talking about them because their team's 0-3 because they can't finish games. And it's starting to shape up this game right now against BC. Looks like it may come down to a wire at the end of this game. So I don't know what Edmonton went through this last year too. They started off like, what was it, 0-10 or 0-9 or something before they finally got their first win, and a chunk of those games were, 1-score games or within, X amount of points. So, I don't know, man. I don't know what Edmonton needs to do either. I mean, they went out and they thought it might have been a quarterback. They went out and got one, and here we are talking about them losing to Toronto in another, less than 8-point game.
So it's a funny story, and I'm going to pull this up real quick. So bear with me for just a moment. It's a funny story to think back and think that when Edmonton hired Chris Jones, there was significant fear that he may not actually finish out his contract with Edmonton because of him leaving. Now, after multiple seasons with the team, it looks like he will not finish his contract with the Elks because of their decision to move on from him at some point. And obviously I'm slightly biased. I firmly believe Chris Jones should not be where he's at right now. He should have been let go last season, and this season starting off winless is just an indication that their faith in him was misplaced. I know there is a CFL coaching salary cap. I know that plays a factor into their decision to probably keep him around. But if you look, he signed a 4-year deal in 2021. So he's coming up towards the end of that contract. So I'm thinking, probably as we go longer and longer in the season, less obligation to continue to pay him down the road. So, maybe it gets to a point where you just cannot justify keeping him around anymore, depending on how long this losing goes on. I know there was a ticket sale last year that, if they continue to lose at home, you continue to get in for free if you bought a ticket to a game. And that was, a genius promotion. but you don't really want to be running promotions like that, after 9-10 weeks into the season. That's getting a little ridiculous after that.
Yeah, and it's so hard because Edmonton obviously wants to stay invested in their guy, and let's be honest, the last 2 seasons, so far this season right now and last season, there was a lot of close games that they lost, but at some point you have to look at it from an organizational standpoint or even a fan standpoint and go, he's being outcoached, and he's being outcoached. Like, it's just, there's really no other explanation for it. It's just he's out of his element, especially when it comes to finishing games. So I would not be surprised, because if my calculation is right, if he signed that in 2021, this is his 4th year, so he is in a contract year. That would be, him possibly, he might be the first coach fired in season.
He signed it in December of 2021. So I think that was after 2021
22,
season.
23, 24. So he's in the 3rd year. So there's still a possibility, though, that they could just bite the bullet and eat the salary cap and move on. I don't know how that works with the CFL as far as that's concerned. They're usually pretty tight-lipped on contracts and how those things are run, but they might just eat it and let him go if the losing continues.
What do you have to lose at this point? I mean, you could realistically just take a flyer. I mean, throw a dart at any coach that happens to be in that coaching staff right now, and just give them a shot. Because really, I mean, at this point, how much worse could it get? I know they've been close in games, but I think that, a lot of times when you're losing a lot of close games, the difference is that coaching, and it's time to make a move, So at this point, I think you can no longer deny the fact that Chris Jones needs to be gone, whether it's this season, after the year. If he goes into 2025 as the head coach and the general manager again, I mean, that's a huge mistake for this team. And let's hope it doesn't get to that, but we'll see. We'll see. Trey Ford definitely right now is hoping it doesn't get to that, because his career's on the line as we move into like his 3rd season, and he's just not getting an opportunity there, despite all the losing.
Yeah, and obviously that's a big, question mark as to why he's not playing, and there's been grumblings and stuff like that, et cetera, et cetera. But yeah, man, it's it's tough with the Elks. I wish them the best. I post Chris Jones, it's just it's not working as far as that's concerned. Did want to give a live update. It's 13-12 at half BC.
All right. Well, on that note, we're going to go ahead and move on to the last game from last week, which is the Hamilton Tiger Cats at Saskatchewan Roughriders. And this one was one of the other blowouts of the weekend. It didn't initially start that way. It was 18-7 at half, which I wouldn't consider necessarily a blowout. But then in the second half, Saskatchewan kind of poured it on a little bit and really opened up that gap by the end of the year, or the end of the game. So we talked about it a little bit ago. Saskatchewan's 3-0. You weren't necessarily super surprised by that, but what about the way they've been winning these games has been surprising to you?
Well, I mean, I am surprised that they're 3-0, because of just I didn't expect them to be this far ahead. They were kind of the team preseason that I had like hovering right around that playoff position to be able to get in and maybe make some noise and some damage. The thing that has really surprised me with them is this defense. While it has given up some big plays, overall, when it comes to tightening down when it needs to, they do a fantastic job of tightening everything up and not allowing drives to continue that could be key momentum changers. And they're opportunistic. They are taking the ball away at the most at the best time possible. You saw it against Edmonton. They turned over Edmonton twice in the fourth quarter in that game to take the lead and then pull ahead. The second game, I can't remember who they played off the top of my head. It was another comeback behind victory, but they had a turnover in that game too late that led to a touchdown that put them ahead. So, two comeback from behind victories for the Saskatchewan team, and then they go out there and do what they did to Hamilton. It really should put the league on notice, because if this team continues to get confident and they continue to start believing in themselves, and they have a head coach who will absolutely be like, hey, like, you can do this, and they will believe in their head coach, it could spell danger for the rest of the league. I'm not even going to lie, and that includes Montreal, because I think the Saskatchewan defense is just going to get better. And as long as they continue being opportunistic and can avoid any type of injury bugs, I think this team is one of the more balanced teams in the league. However, the run game, which was definitely better against Hamilton, needs to stay that way, because that's going to be the key component. Because the first two games were very pass heavy. I know they were playing from behind and kind of abandon the run, but they can't get into that. They can't fall into that rabbit hole. They have to try to continue to keep AJ Ouellette involved in this game, in the game plan, because when they're balanced, they're at their best.
Absolutely, and I'm glad you pointed that out. AJ Ouellette, they were able to get him back, on stride where he should be, rushing very near 100 yards and kind of all-purposing around that 150-yard mark, which he had 47 on the through the air. So I mean, he's a great player, one of the better players in the CFL. So I mean, Saskatchewan needs to do a better job of really dedicating themselves to getting him the ball, because he's one of those guys that can really, change a game for you, for lack of a better term. And I mean, I know they definitely didn't see an injury to Trevor Harris coming, and they probably were not prepared to shove Shea Patterson in there as their starter, or as the quarterback the rest of the way. And maybe that kind of altered their game plan more toward Ouellette. But at the same time, I mean, he should be getting 20 to 25 touches a game every game. No questions about it anyway. So, to their credit, they definitely need to get him more involved as the season goes on. It's only going to help that defense. Realistically, you keep them off the field, you keep them fresh, they're going to create a lot more of those turnovers in key situations.
Yeah, and I know Saskatchewan's got a pretty good, damn good receiving core, and Trevor Harris was playing lights out and stuff, but you don't want to lean too much into one player, and I felt like they were leaning too much into Harris in the first two games. This one felt a lot more balanced, though, because the AJ Ouellette, rushes were kind of coming in the first half. It was the second half that they really showed off, and that was primarily because of Shea Patterson. But they were balanced enough in the first half that they were able to open this game up early and kind of keep Hamilton at bay. On Hamilton's side, Bo Levi Mitchell's played really well. As a healthy quarterback, finally, he's kind of making plays that are, key and whatnot. But you can see, interception again, like this Saskatchewan defense being opportunistic at the right times when things happen. But you take a look at Bo Levi's numbers, and they're not terrible. However, like Saskatchewan had with the running game, Hamilton's has been practically non-existent, minus a few key outbreaks, or big gains, which doesn't happen very often. But that the run game, particularly against Saskatchewan, was dreadful.
Yeah, they have had some real struggles getting that run game going in Hamilton so far this season. I mean, with James Butler back there, it's somewhat surprising. I mean, I know he's not necessarily a world beater, but he's had some very good games in his CFL career, and for him to just kind of struggle this season so far has been surprising. But then again, when you're getting 5 carries in a game, it's hard to build momentum and really break one at any point in time. They realistically just abandoned the run right away. And yes, it was part of that was game flow, obviously, but at the same time, the second that you get one dimensional is when you're going to see late interceptions like we did, against Hamilton this past week. But wanted to shout out a former guest of the show, Shamar Bridges, right here, 10 targets, 9 receptions, 113 yards, and a touchdown. That is the first 100-yard game of his professional career, coming out of, I don't recall which college at this point. He definitely has had a little bit of a struggle kind of getting his footing underneath him. He was with Baltimore's practice squad last year. They did not bring him back after the season. He chose to make the immediate jump to the CFL and has had great success so far there in Hamilton. So awesome to see for him. He's truly a great guy. I really wish him nothing but success. And I really think that he made a great decision for his long-term future by jumping to the CFL immediately rather than kind of waiting for a year for the NFL to catch up to how good he could be. You might as well go play.
Fort Valley State.
Thank you for looking that up. I appreciate that.
How do you know I looked it up? How do you know I didn't already know?
I mean, I'm just assuming.
I mean, you're correct, but still, you shouldn't assume that.
This is true. I shouldn't assume that,
no,
especially with you.
No, I was going to say Grand Valley State, and I knew that didn't sound right, but it was Fort Valley State is where he played. So, yeah, Bridges was kind of a little bit of a darling undrafted sleeper in fantasy football last year. So I played a couple years ago, so I paid a little close attention to him. But I'm glad he's having success in Hamilton, and him and Bo Levi are on the same page because they're fun to watch. This Hamilton team may have gotten blown out by Saskatchewan, but make no mistake about it, this Hamilton team is fun to watch when they can click on all cylinders. But James Butler, it's been inconsistent with how they're doing it. But I was more concerned about the overall lack of carries the team had. I think he led the carries with 5, right? I mean, you're looking at 9 total, I think.
Yep.
So that's a problem.
Yeah, no doubt. I mean, that's not sustainable as an offense. Like I said, you get that one dimensional, and you're giving a defense the ability to just back off into coverage and or send extra pass rushers and not really have to fear a draw play or anything like that because it's just not coming. So at that point, you have to do something more with this run game in order to get it going. You have to get creative. Mix in some trick plays. Something has to happen for this to work. You're asking Bo Levi Mitchell to carry this offense. And I don't want to say that he's not talented enough to do that, but he's always had the propensity to throw interceptions throughout his career. And now when you ask him to carry a team, you're probably going to see that a little bit more. When you ask him to manage the game, allow his playmakers like a Shamar Bridges, like a Desmond Patman, James Butler getting 15 to 20 carries a game, will do a valuable amount of the workload. All of a sudden, maybe you see a better side of Bo Levi in these games. But until they kind of show a little bit more dedication to that run game, we will never know, unfortunately. But we're going to go ahead and hit a quick commercial break, and then we will reset with some quick talk about a potential ownership change in Edmonton.
I'm just being myself, cool as can be. When I'm being myself, you wish you were me. It's so easy. Get out your own way. It's just so easy.
So yeah, as always, shout out to our sponsors of this particular show, Upside and Current. Upside is a free app that pays you cash back on purchases you're guaranteed already making on a weekly basis. So definitely check that out. And then Current is, in my opinion, one of the better banking apps out there today. So also check that out. If you use our code, you get $50 just for signing up. What's better than that? But we're going to go ahead and move on to our next subject. Like I said before the break, Edmonton has the potential to be sold very soon. So, per Kevin Carius on his morning show, Sports 1440, I'm led to believe that the sale of the Go Elks, or Edmonton Elks as they're known, to a private owner is all but complete. Exciting news, exciting times for the city and organization. And this was posted by Eddie Steele. Make sure to go follow all of those people on Twitter, X, whatever you want to call it. But great news for Edmonton. What's your immediate reaction to hear that Elks might be sold fairly soon?
I think it's fantastic, and primarily I think it's fantastic because we know that the CFL has been, under a lot of financial scrutiny over the last few years, especially certain teams and whatnot, and a lot of grumblings and talks about part of the reason why they can't expand and et cetera, et cetera. But whenever there's any type of private sale for any team in any league, I think it's a great thing overall for the league's sustainability, because it gives, as long as they're vetted and as long as they're able to maintain how much it costs to run a football team, um, it allows a foundation for the sport to continue to grow and eventually draw in new investors and draw in new people that may, be like, oh, well, if this person's doing it, I think I can do it here. So it's always good to have that for sure. So I'm excited for Edmonton. I hope that the new owners are football people and understand what they're getting into, and I hope that they are able to not only help the franchise, but hopefully help the league in their continued investment into expanding.
Absolutely. And I wanted to show off this top comment right here. With any luck for Elks fans, the new owner will fire Jones and change it back to the Eskimos.
Well, I can tell you that firing Jones, yes, changing it back to the Eskimos is not going to happen. So it's very much the same as like the Redskins in the NFL. Like, it's just not going to happen. Regardless of what we may believe for nostalgic factor, it's unlikely going to happen.
Absolutely. And to your credit, talking a little bit about the money woes in the CFL here last season, they reported $35.6 million in total revenue, which ultimately was a loss, a $1.1 million loss for the league, in, I believe, their 108th year. Don't quote me on that, though. They also saw a decrease from the previous season, although, as it says here, a lot of that was due to the fact that the team that was in the Grey Cup also was, the home team. So that's going to help attendance, help sales, and it definitely made a huge difference last season. So they went from a slight profit last year to a slight loss this year, or this past season. So that's definitely something to watch going forward for the future of the CFL. Although, they've realistically lost money for a long time, and it really hasn't changed much. So, bringing in this new ownership group, that certainly helps spread out the obligations a little bit more, and that's always a good thing for the sustainability of some of these leagues going forward.
Well, and the other thing I also want to mention too is, I do believe, however, that last year was the first year that all the games were free on CFL Plus for Americans. But the year prior to that, they were on ESPN, and anytime there was a game on ESPN2 or ESPN, those numbers were fantastic. So I'm glad they're on CBS for a good chunk of games this year. If they can find and land in a American channel to be able to view the games over here, that will also bring in new investors and new not investors, new sponsors to the league as well, because it was growing prior to leaving ESPN, and the numbers last year probably were all strict to TSN because it's on CFL Plus. This year, I'll be interested to see what happens with the CBS deal and how much the viewerships were there, because CBS Sports Network reaches about as many people as ESPN and ESPN2 does. So
Absolutely. CBS Sports, by the way, is doing a great job of really bringing light to these alternative football leagues, whether it's the CFL, the IFL, or now, as we know, or it appears, the AFL as well. So awesome to see all these different leagues now on TV and being available for fans. But we're going to go ahead and shift gears one final time before we get out of here for the night and do our predictions. I know this one's going to be kind of odd because we have an ongoing game, but we're going to do that one first to get it out of the way. And because it's still only midway, we got about 13 minutes left in the third quarter, and it's 13-12. So this is still very much a toss-up game. So if you had to go back and look or go back in time and give us a prediction for this game, what would it be?
BC 13-12. No, I'm just kidding. I think that this game is going to come down to another close one for Edmonton. I think they're too talented of a team to get like blown out for the most part, but it's going to come down to coaching again, and I think BC's got the edge. Vernon Adams is playing really, really well overall. I mean, you can see he's not 100% tonight, but he's still carrying this team to making plays. I believe originally my thought process was the score of this game was going to be 31-26, I think. So I'm going to stick with that. 31-26. I think BC wins this one.
Alrighty.
Even though the game trend seems to be heading in a different direction right now, I'm going to stick with what I originally had going.
Sounds good. And then we're going to go ahead and pull up the betting odds for the other three games. We do not have the current game that is going on right now, obviously. But moving on to the next game this weekend is Montreal versus Toronto, which is going to be a great game. Obviously separated by only 3 points, probably due to the fact that Toronto is the home team. Money line right there, plus 145 for the Toronto Argonauts, negative 165 for the Alouettes. 51.5 over under. So I'm curious, in this game, what are your predictions and what are you betting on if it was you?
Well, I mean, if I'm betting, I'm taking Toronto +3. I think Toronto's going to win this game. I like Montreal a lot. Don't get me wrong. Cody Fajardo's playing lights out right now, but something about this Toronto team and the fact that they're able to find ways to win with Cameron Dukes is potentially dangerous. I'm taking the over. If you don't want to take the point spread as well, I think this game could be potentially one of the more high-scoring games of the weekend. We just saw a game with Toronto last week where they, 75 combined points. So I think Toronto wins this game 34-30 in a close one.
Wow. I've actually got Montreal winning. I would actually take Montreal to cover the spread as well. As much as I love Cameron Dukes, Montreal, after they just decimated Ottawa last week, I'm seeing them in a new light, and I wonder if they are honestly I wonder if they're stoppable this season. Winnipeg would have been my first bet to knock them off this year, but with them kind of floundering right now, I guess it's up to BC. Because I just don't see Toronto doing it right now. If Chad Kelly was active in this game, maybe my feelings change a little bit. But I just think Cameron Dukes in this game, I got to give the edge to Montreal on that defense. So I'm taking Montreal. I could definitely see them hitting the over in this game. I think Montreal scored, 47 points last week? And, so that's between the two of them, they scored almost 90 points last week. So, I definitely think this is going to hit the over. I actually like your score a lot, although I'm going to go 37-31 and Montreal, like I said, taking the over. I'll take Montreal to cover the spread. And, I think it's going to be a great game. Still going to be coming down to the wire, but ultimately I think Montreal wins it by 6. Moving on to the Saturday game, all of these 7 o'clock, 7:30 p.m. games, Mountain Time, 9:30 p.m. Eastern. So definitely check in all these games this weekend. Like Michael said, available on CBS Sports or CFL Plus, which is completely free to sign up for, by the way, if you're not aware. Winnipeg at Calgary. Your Calgary Stampeders, what do you have in this game?
I'm taking Calgary +3, and I'm taking the under in this game. Dalton Schoen being out is huge. Lawler not coming back, not being ready is big. Jake Mayers looked well. Don't get me wrong. I mean, he's played very well. I mean, I'm as a Calgary fan, I'm very, very, pleasantly surprised, and I'm happy to see it. I took Calgary in this game, though. I don't know what's going on with Winnipeg, and until they can identify where it is and what's happening, I think it's going to be another close loss. But I don't know if they're going to have enough offensive firepower this week. We'll see what happens next week when it comes to who they bring in or who they activate to bring, or who they activate to move up for Dalton Schoen. But I'm taking Calgary in this game. I'm taking the under at the 47 mark for a 24 to 21 victory, 3-point game.
All right, 24 to 21 Calgary. He is taking Calgary and the points. So definitely going to be an interesting game. I am also taking Calgary, although I expect the deficit to be a little bit bigger than that. I'm going to go, 24 actually sounds really good. Let's go 26 to 19. I think it'll be in that 6 to 7 point range, and even that feels a little hefty. I think Winnipeg's going to keep it close, but ultimately I think this is going to be one of those games where Jake Mayer kind of lights it up, because I don't expect Winnipeg to get a whole lot of pressure on him. So if he's able to sit back there and kind of just, eat, then he's probably going to have a good game. We're probably going to see, Jake Mayer, the MOP candidate, not Jake Mayer, the guy who's about to hit the bench.
I hope so, anyways.
Yeah, well, I'm sure you and every other Stampeders fan is hoping that they get the good version of Jake Mayer this weekend. But moving on to the final game of the weekend, Hamilton at Ottawa. This game right here is a 1-point difference, and they have Ottawa as the favorite with a 51.5 point over under. I'm kind of surprised to see that over under. Seems a little high. Ottawa has not scored a whole lot of points this season so far. Hamilton's done a little bit better in that category. What is your prediction and bets on these ones?
This is the one game I've had the most issues with, because Hamilton is playing better than what the record shows. Ottawa's that team that's on the up and coming, right? Like, they need to win these middle games in order to really eventually make their way to the upper echelon of the league. I think I'm going to take Ottawa -1 on the under. It's tough. Hamilton, I think, has the ability to win this game. I like Drew Brown, though. I still think he played fairly well, considering last week it was ugly, but at halftime. I think Ottawa wins this game 22 to 20.
Okay, interesting. I'm actually going to go the other direction, and there's a reason why. Don't quote me on this once again. This is off the top of my head. I know I have the numbers somewhere in my notes. I believe it's 9 straight matchups that Hamilton has defeated Ottawa. Does not matter if it's at home or away. They just always seem to have Ottawa's number, and I think they're going to have it in this game as well, as much as I hate to say that as a Red Blacks fan. I think Hamilton's going to come to play and ultimately take home a victory in this one, especially after last week. I think they're probably angry about how last week went. I think they're going to put up 30 points on Ottawa. So I'm going to go 30 to 24 in this one. I think it's going to be a decent day by Ottawa. I think they'll keep it somewhat close, or, at least it'll look close by the end of the game. But I think ultimately we're going to see a situation where Hamilton takes this one home this week.
Yeah, that streak needs to come to an end, and it's going to this week.
Shoot, I hope you're right. I hope you're right. I would prefer to be wrong in this one. But we'll see. I mean, I really hope they do find a way to win this game. It would definitely give me a lot more hope after the slaughter that we endured last season or last week as Red Black fans. So yeah, we'll see. I hope so. I hope so. Like you said.
I'm going to tell our viewers right now, if Ottawa wins this game for the rest of the year, unless I pick the same as Sam on Ottawa games, do the exact opposite. That's only if Ottawa wins this week.
Yeah, I would agree. I agree. Definitely. I mean, if you pick Ottawa this week and they win, and I picked them last week and they lose, you know who to listen to here now. But any final thoughts before we wrap this up for the night?
No, not at all. I just wanted to say that so far, outside of outside of the Trevor Harris injury, which hopefully is not too severe and he's back, the quarterback play has been really, really good. And I know I probably shouldn't send a compliment out because the last time I did that, it went to friggin' nightmare the following couple of weeks. But I'm glad to see Bo Levi healthy. Trevor Harris was slinging it before he got hurt. Cameron Dukes, I love seeing that with him in Toronto. Jake Mayer playing much better. Vernon Adams obviously playing like an MOP. So Drew Brown has looked fairly solid for Ottawa. So the quarterback play overall has been pretty damn good. So if Winnipeg can ever get on track, it should make for a very exciting down the stretch run into the home stretch of the playoffs in the CFL. So we got a long ways to go, and we'll be here talking about it the whole way. But just wanted to give compliments to that early in the season.
No, I think that's a great point. And tonight's another example. Both quarterbacks are kind of slinging it. McLeod Bethel Thompson and Vernon Adams, two of the better ones in the league. Still score 13-12. 9 minutes left to go in the third quarter for your final update of the show. Thank you, everybody who tuned in with us. We really appreciate it. It looks like the high water mark was almost 60 viewers at one point. I really can't tell you how much I appreciate you guys tuning in every week and tuning in on all of our shows. It seems like our support is steadily growing, and we really appreciate all of it. If we could ask you for one more little favor that is completely free to accomplish for you, free for us as well, hit that like button. A lot of people don't realize how big of a factor that is for people who are watching on YouTube, who are watching on Twitter, who are watching on Twitch. The more you hit those like buttons, the more that platform then recommends us out to new viewers who have not seen our stuff before, and then it helps us continue our growth. We've had a really good success with it recently. You guys have been doing great for us, so I hope you continue that. But on that note, we'll go ahead and catch you guys in the next episode. We've got a lot of great content coming up. We just had Dynasty Academy earlier tonight. We just had Eagles Elite yesterday. We also had Summer Showcase Overtime. Summer Showcase was on Tuesday, the regular episode. Monarchs of Wrestling on Monday. We got more Big 3 games this weekend. So really just bringing you guys nonstop action. So make sure you're tuned in. Make sure you're subscribed. Make sure you're following us on all social media platforms you're on, because some of them get a little bit different content than others. But we will definitely catch you guys next week. Have a great night. And again, thank you for watching.